Shabbat Shalom, Chanukah Sameach, Chodesh Tov. Lots of joy and lots of celebration this morning. Folks, my father, Alav HaShalom, had many beautiful qualities. And one of the qualities that he had was that he tended to get nervous about things. That was just part of his disposition. Apparently, when he was a child, his mother, my grandmother, understood this about him, and each morning when he would wake up, she would say to him, Heshi, that's what she called him, his name was Harold, Heshi, don't be nervous. And that made my father more nervous. So he would actually get up early in the morning and he would take long walks in the nearby park in order to avoid his mother telling him not to be nervous. Fear is a reality for all of us, partly a reflection of personality, but partly a reflection of the fact that life is complicated and there are all sorts of things that are thrown our way that make us nervous. There is a woman who is a wonderful author. Her name is Roxane Gay. She wrote about her own circumstances and she wrote about some of the terrifying experiences that she had, in particular when she was younger. And she was giving a masterclass to aspiring writers, and she was telling them what it means to write. And she said the following to them: you don't need to be brave when you're writing. You need to acknowledge that you are terrified and do it anyway. We don't have to be writers or trapeze artists or world leaders in order to experience fear. We all have fears about all sorts of circumstances in our lives. And this morning, towards the end of the holiday of Hanukkah, I want to say to all of us, including myself, that life is about doing things even though we are afraid. Life is about doing things anyway. I want to take us on a brief journey into the past and then back to the present. So we are reading about the story of Joseph and his brothers, and there are two people who step forward even though they are afraid. One of them is Judah, Yehudah, Joseph's brother. And Yehudah was told by his father, make sure nothing happens to your brother Benjamin. If something happens to him, I don't know what I'll do. And here he is. We read the best cliffhanger, perhaps, in our tradition, where he realizes that Benjamin is going to be Joseph's slave. He doesn't even know it's Joseph. Joseph is in disguise. And then the Torah tells us, Vayigash elav Yehudah, that Judah steps forward and he tries to convince Joseph that he should let brother Benjamin go. There's a tradition that Judah was fierce, that his hair stood up like the fur of a lion. But I believe that Judah was probably very afraid, and that Judah stepped forward anyway, despite his fears, because he understood how important that was. And Joseph in this story is also afraid. He's afraid to reveal himself to his brothers. He's afraid of his own anger. He's afraid of what their response might be. He's wondering if they love him after all. And he also steps forward despite his fears. He does it anyway. Centuries later, Esther is going to be deeply afraid about entering into the inner chamber of the king to advocate for her people, and she is going to do it anyway. And if you believe that the Maccabees, who fought against the descendants of the Greeks, were not afraid, then you are denying human nature. Of course, they were afraid. Being human is about stepping forward even though we are afraid. We have to take actions regardless of our fears. In 1931, in Germany, a woman by the name of Rachel Posner, the wife of Rabbi and Professor Akiva Posner, took a photo of her Chanukiah, her Hanukkah menorah. They were living in Germany at the time, 1931. So there was her Hanukkah menorah, and across from their apartment was a government building that had been taken over by the Nazis. The Nazis were hanging swastika flags. And so there she was, putting her Hanukkah menorah in the window, and across from that Hanukkah menorah, the symbol of Nazi evil. She took a photo that would capture the Hanukkah menorah and the swastika flag, and she wrote the following on the back of the photo: "Death to Judah, so says the flag. Judah will live forever, so says this light." The Chanukiah is now in Yad Vashem, and the family light that Chanukiah every year on Hanukkah to commemorate how she stepped forward even though she must have been afraid. Rising anti-Semitism has been raising fears not felt in the United States in recent years, and you have seen surveys which reveal that many Jewish people of all ages are feeling fearful about expressing their Jewishness publicly, fearful about wearing a Magen David, about displaying Jewish symbols. We shouldn't, of course, act recklessly, but we should understand the importance of forthrightly affirming our Jewish identities despite whatever fears we might have. We may well have fears as Jews, and we may also have fears that are universal. And to paraphrase the words of the author that I quoted, living is about realizing that we are afraid and doing what we believe we need to do anyway. We may be afraid to end a certain situation and to start a new one. We may be afraid to leave one place and go to another place. But if we believe we need to do it, we do it anyway. We may be afraid to assert ourselves. We may be afraid to take controversial stands. But if we believe we need to do it, we do it anyway. We may be afraid to confront illness, physical illness, or mental illness, or any type of addiction. But if we believe we need to do it, we do it anyway. We may be afraid to acknowledge the challenges that are facing us. It is often easier initially to deny, but if we believe we need to do it, we do it anyway. We all are asked to move forward despite our fears, to move forward with our fears. Vayigash Yehuda, Judah stepped forward. That applies not just to him, it applies to all of us. So I want to conclude by slightly amending the words of the author that I shared earlier. She said, if you will recall, that writing isn't about being brave, it's about acknowledging you're afraid, terrified even, and doing it anyway. I would put it a little differently. I would say the following. Living requires acknowledging that we're afraid and doing what we need to do anyway. But that, doing what we need to do anyway, stepping forward despite and with our fears, is very brave indeed. So I wish us Shabbat Shalom. May this Shabbat bring us closer to a true sense of peace. I wish us Chodesh Tov. May this new month open up new opportunities and possibilities for us. And I wish us Chag Urim Sameach. May we continue to bring light into the world, especially when we are afraid. Amen.